But welcome to the Tuesday night series. This is the third one that we've done, and we're looking at doing card making kind of from a beginning standpoint, but it also serves, I think, as a really good reminder and refresher for other folks. And tonight what I wanted to talk about was how we can create our own pattern paper, also known as designer series paper. And the card we're going to be making is this one here. And it was very easy to use just a few stamps and some ink to go ahead and create the type of look that I wanted. The daffodils are coming up, the crocuses and the hyacinth are up, so the colors of spring are really starting to show through. And that's what I wanted this card to portray. Now we have lots of designer series paper that we can choose from on a day-to-day basis. We either can get them at the big box stores in paper pads, or I pulled out just a few of the designer series paper patterns that are available through Stampin' Up. And as you can see, and well, trust me, I don't have them all. This is probably only a third of the pattern papers that we carry. So there is a lot to choose from. Everything from foiled ones like you see here, black and white. And when I first saw it, I wasn't quite sure if it was my thing, but the more I work with it, the more I'm really getting to enjoy it. And then I did have some springtime pattern papers as well, but they just didn't have the colors in them that were in my mind to create a card. So I thought, well, no problem. I'll just go ahead and create my own. The card itself is really very simple. It's just a card base, 4 1/4 by 11 scored and folded at 5 1/2 for my standard top folding card. And then it has a piece of Whisper White that's only slightly smaller. It measures 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. And that's what I use for the to make my own pattern paper. And then because there's a lot going on in the card, I really didn't want to add a lot of business, but I also didn't want to cover up the wonderful colors. So I just did a small square, stitch square for my sentiment panel and backed it with some more of the same cardstock. This is Blushing Bride that I used for the card base. Just a few embellishments, and that's all there was to it. Let's go ahead and get started on this so you can really see how easy it is. The stamp set that I'm going to be using is our Oh So Eclectic. And it has some wonderful flowers on here. But not only does it have the outline images, but it has these great watercolor stamps as well. So we'll be doing what we call two-step stamping. And there's also some cute ones that are probably meant for the center of the flowers, but I just used it as filler to cover up some of the blank spots. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and bring my panel of Whisper White out. I have everything hiding in my card base here. And the inks that we're going to be using today, I have Pink Pirouette. I also have Blushing Bride to match my cardstock. And then we're going to be using some little ink spots. This is Daffodil Delight, appropriate with all the daffodils coming up in the yard. And also some Lemon Lime Twist. I wanted to keep the leaves a very light green. So the Lemon Lime Twist gives me just enough of that without being overpowering. All right, so I have my images mounted onto my stamps. Onto my blocks. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up my inks. See if I can do this without making a big mess all over. And I love these little ink spots because one of the things you're going to see me do is take and color just the stem of one of the flowers in the green. And that would be very difficult to do with a full-size ink pad. All right, put my card where I can see it. And it really doesn't matter where you start. Important things to remember though, run your images off the page for it to look very organic and not quite so matchy-matchy. And turn your stamps so they're not all facing the same way, unless of course that's the look that you're going for. Because I'm going to be stamping off of the panel, I'm going to bring in some scratch paper here to protect my work surface. Also to give me a little bit of cushioning, although with these clear rubber stamps, there's plenty of cushion there. And then I just need to decide where I'm going to start and which flower. I really like this one. And this is the one where I'm going to do the flower in one color and the stem in another. So I'm just going to take my Daffodil Delight ink, give it a good squash here. And then I'm going to take my Lemon Lime Twist and just do the stem. Just making sure I have it inked up. And I always like coming in from a corner to start. So I'm going to pick this upper left-hand corner, lay my stamp down, let it sit for just a moment or two for the ink to absorb, and pull it up. And that easy, we've done our first one. I'm now going to come in with the filler stamp and also stamp that in the Daffodil Delight. But because I want the filler image to be lighter, I'm going to go ahead and stamp off before stamping over the flower. Now you're probably thinking, well, Linda, how can you even see where it's going? With this, it really doesn't matter. This is designed to look kind of like a watercolor image. So it's going to go outside the lines. It's going to sometimes be a little crooked, and that's just fine. I think I'll continue on with the bigger flower, and this one I'm going to go ahead and stamp it in Blushing Bride for the outline stamp. And again, I'm going to put one right dead center middle because I always end up being blank in the middle. And this way I don't have to worry about stamping over another one. And then I'm going to use Pink Pirouette for my filler. And again, I'm going to stamp off. And here, I'm going to just make sure that this oval is facing roughly the same way. And then come in and stamp straight down. So very light color, but it really adds a soft, soft look. I think I'll continue on with this, so I'll go back to my Blushing Bride. And I'm just going to do a few of these larger flowers. And what the heck? Let's do one up here too. And maybe the corner of one right down here. So that's all the big flowers that I'm going to do, so I can put that aside for now. Come in with my Pink Pirouette. Now, if you wanted your color to be a little more vivid, not a problem. Don't stamp off before you stamp. And as you can see, it's a little crooked, but I'm fine with that. It's, again, supposed to look like a watercolor wash. Kind of like the way that looks, so let's continue on with it. Turning it to make sure, oops, my little oval. Now that one didn't come out very good because I had way too much ink and applied too much pressure. But luckily, that's where our sentiment's going to go. So I'm not going to worry too much about it. Let me just clean that off a little bit. I pressed way too hard on my ink pad and actually made a mistake and used my Blushing Bride. So let's go with the Pink Pirouette, which is what the filler should be. I'll come down to this image, and there we go. All right, so I'm done with the filler for that. Let's go back to our pretty flower. And Julie, you may know what this is, but I'm just going to pretend it's one of my spring flowers that are outside. As I recall, I can't think of the name of the flower, but they have these almost transparent petals with the color so light that it reflects back the sunlight. Really pretty. And again, I want to make sure that I am angling so that all of my flowers are not going the same way, and I'm stamping off the page. While I have it in my hand, I'm just going to go ahead and stamp one or two more. It really is fun and relaxing to do this. I think I'm happy with that for now. I do need to come in with my filler image though, remembering to stamp off. And just putting a nice little layer of color down. I think these ones layer particularly nice. All right, so I think we're pretty good with flowers, but now let's go ahead and do our leaves. And this is where we're really going to start filling in the paper. So anywhere I've got a pretty big open area, and here is perfect, just going to go ahead and stamp down my image. And again, make sure you're coming off the page. Now here, I don't have as many big spaces, but that doesn't mean I can't come in and lay down my leaves, making sure that they're going off the page. Be sure to turn your panel so that you can get a good angle for where you want to put things. And it's fine just to have a couple of leaves on the page. And if you go over one of the floral petals a little bit, no big deal. Leaves go over flowers all the time. All right, I just have a few more I'm going to drop in. I think I'll put another one right down here, just the ends of it. And it's starting to really fill up now. And then I'll put a few right there. And I think there's one more spot where I might be able to get one or two in. And then we're going to move on to the filler stamp. So I want just a little bit right there. Okay, so I'm done with that. Now I'm going to take my little beady stamp, is what I call it, little dot stamp. Again, I think it's meant for the center of these flowers. And I'm going to do that in my lightest color, which is my pink pirouette, but I'm going to go ahead and do it full strength because these are so small that I don't have to worry about them being overpowering. So I'm just going in and putting them wherever I see open spaces. Again, I'm turning the stamp so that even though this is just a cluster, it still has a bit of direction to it. And you can see that this then goes in and helps to fill in those white spaces that you might not be happy with. If you like a lot of white space, then I would just stamp a few of them. But I really wanted this to show the joy of spring. So I wanted to get a whole bunch of them on there. Almost done. Just a couple more. down here, I think, and then running off the edge of the paper. And you can even do some stamped off if you just want a hint of color there. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that. Pull it up to the camera so that you can take a look at it. It kind of does look like a buttercup, Julie. I think you might be right on that. All right, next I'm going to just put my bigger inks away for the moment so that I don't drop anything onto them, which will make a mess. And now I'm going to bring in our sentiment panel, and then I did cut a scalloped square to back it up. I just wanted a hint of color behind it, but we're going to put those right there. Nope, sorry, my card's upside down. We're going to put those right there, and you can see where I kind of made that squishy mess with too much ink. I can cover most of that up with that panel. We do need to go ahead and stamp on it though. So I'm going to pull our designer paper away for the moment. And the sentiment that we're going to use is from one of our celebration items, or our occasions items. This is Waterfront. And I just really enjoyed Friends Make the Good Times Better. So that's the one we're going to be using. And I decided I didn't want to use black because I wanted to keep the softness of the card. So we're going to go ahead and use Blushing Bride. I tell you what, Blushing Bride has quickly become just one of my favorite colors. It's pink enough, but it has just enough of a mauve in it. And this is a photopolymer stamp, so I'm able to see right through it, which comes in handy for me because I don't always stamp the straightest. So I'll decide where I want it. Make sure I have it inked up well. I think that's good. And go for it. Again, I'm holding the stamp down just for a beat of 2 or 3 to make sure that I get a good imprint. The last thing I'm going to do is take I'm going to go ahead and call it a buttercup, Julie, and I'm going to ink it up and add it right to our sentiment panel. So again, I'm using my Daffodil Delight, my Lemon Lime Twist just for the stem. And you know, if you come up a little too high and get a little bit on the flower, no big deal. I've seen lots of flowers that have green that way. And then I'm just going to decide where I want it. And you know what? I'm going to turn my stamp a little bit. Sometimes you can do this, but you got to make sure you've got it pressed onto the block so it doesn't spring back. There, I like that better. And again, if I go off the top, that's just fine. Makes it look organic. All right, and we'll take my filler and do it in the daffodil, but I'm going to stamp it off, keeping it very soft and bringing it over and just stamping it down. All right, now we're ready. Oh, no, one last thing. Put a couple leaves on here so it doesn't look naked. As you know, we hate naked flowers. But not too many. Just going to do 2 or 3. Just like that. Actually, I want one more. Just right up here. There we go. Okay, now I can close up all my ink pads. And we're ready to put our card together. Okay, So here's my, again, my card base, 4 1/4 by 11 inches, scored and folded at 5 1/2 for a top folding card. I'm going to go ahead and take the panel that we made our own designer series paper on. Just going to use some Tombow glue so I have that little bit of wiggle room to maneuver. It's hard getting around this camera sometimes, so if my head gets in the way, I apologize. But I'm just going to line that up. And then I always pick the card up to make sure I'm happy with it. And press it down. While that's drying, we're going to do the same with our sentiment panel. So I'll put a little Tombow on it. And this has a really tiny, tiny border. So I'm picking it up so I can see exactly where it's going to go. And as you can see, I'll pull it up here. It has just a tiny, tiny border. All right, and we'll let that dry. I did want to let you know that for the sentiment panel, I used the stitch shapes, the square, and it's the second one from the largest. So that was what I used for my stitch square. And then to get the scallop, I used the layering squares framelets. I just got these about a week ago, and I am really having fun with them. And as you can see, we have not only straight edge, we have scallops. And this one, I used the second from the largest in this grouping. And that gave me just that little peak of color. All right, I think everything is dry now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this up using some dimensionals. I like it when it throws a little bit of a shadow behind it because that also helps to separate it or give it definition from the card base. So I'll just pull in my dimensionals here. And I like to do it in the 4 corners and one in the middle to make sure it doesn't sink in. Get those pesky backs off and see where they end up. I found one on my husband's coffee cup this morning, the bottom of his coffee cup. No idea how it got there. Okay. Now I'm just going to determine where I want it, and I'm very gently going to put it down because if it's crooked at all, I still can maneuver it a little bit. And then when I'm happy, I press it down. I did use some of our enamel dots that are in the Blushing Bride. So we'll bring those in. I used one of the hearts on the sentiment panel itself, right up here. And then I used one of the large ones, trying to form like a triangular shape. Triangles are very pleasing to the eye. So I'm going to go ahead and put one right here. And then I took a little bitty one and completed my triangle. I'm going to put it right in the center of one of my dots. Now I was pretty darn happy with how it looked. But you know, girls gotta have a little sparkle. So I brought in my Wink of Stella, and I just did a couple flowers. I did the main one that's on the sentiment panel. Wanted that to have a little sparkle. And then I think I'm just gonna pick this one down here at the bottom. I really like how that looks. And add some there. And maybe a little to this too. That'll help it stand out in the light. I don't know if you'll be able to see the shine and sparkle, but it really does look lovely. All right, so we've got that one, and then I'll bring in the one that I made earlier today. And now I have two lovely cards that I can send out that celebrate spring. All right, that's the technique that I wanted to show you tonight. What questions do you have about anything that I've done here? Thank you, Julie. I appreciate the kind words. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close out the video then. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. Saturday afternoon at 3 p.m. we have an Anything Goes series, and I'm planning something kind of special for this Saturday, so hope you'll join me then. Otherwise, I'll see you next Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.